Okay folks, we're back with this walk cycle tutorial. Now this will be the third video in the sequence, and the second video we were looking at creating the head and the clothes layer, but for the purpose of kind of moving this forward quickly for you, what I've decided to do is just remove the clothes layer, stick with the head layer, and show you the next part of the sequence, which is really just expanding the frames over 24 frames per second, which will then allow us to work with some tweening and get this full-on kind of illusion where the character is walking not only on the spot but past a series of items. So providing that we're happy with your head layer, your clothes layer, etc., you will no longer have your template layer, but I'm using that instead of having the fully developed clothes layer. Now what we're going to work with doing is selecting the second to the 8th frame on the template layer. And I'm going to do that just by clicking on on the second frame, and then holding on shift and clicking on the last 8th frame. Now what I'm going to do is move these along 2 spaces, which is going to mean that this first frame lasts for 3 frames. Okay, if I do that over the course of these 8 frames, then that's going to multiply 8 by 3, which is going to give us 24, which is exactly where we want it. So repeat the same process. This time I'm going to be starting on the 3rd frame, hold down shift, select 8th frame, move it 2 spaces. This time on the 4th frame, on the 8th, 2 spaces, 5th, 8th, 2 spaces, 6th, 8th, 2 spaces, 7th, 8th, 2 spaces, and I'll use the final one, another 2 spaces. Now don't forget that you've got to also do the same with the 8th frame, and all I need to do is go to frame number 24 and insert frame, and there we go. Okay, so that means that the character is now walking over 24 frames, which would allow us to then change the frames per second to 24. This is where we want it, and we're not going to see any kind of lag. It's going to be the exact same as we were running it a minute ago when it was 8 frames and it was running at 8 frames per second. Now I'm going to just repeat the same process for the head, and the great thing about this is that you're simply just lining up the keyframes from the layer below. So you might have clothes layer, you might have I don't know, props or whatever else you've decided to draw onto your character, and you can make sure you're just lining all of these up. That's one. Insert frame. Okay, now we want to make this animation 10 seconds. So if we're running at 24 frames per second, that means that there's 24 frames for every 1 second of animation. So multiplying this by 10, we need to then multiply that by 10, multiply the number of frames, total frames by 10, which is going to give us 240. So that's going to be the end point of our animation. So what we're going to do is we're going to go along to frame 240, right click on the sky layer, insert frame. Remember, these are our static layers. Okay, and what we're going to do is just select all the frames on the template layer, right click, copy frames, and simply just right click, paste, right click, paste, right click, paste, right click, paste. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the last frame here, hold down shift, click on the first frame, that selects everyone again, right click, copy frames, and because I was bang in the middle there at 120, when I paste the frames again, that's going to take me to 240. Okay, I'll repeat the same process. I select all the frames that I want, copy them, paste them another 4 times to give me 120 frames, and more. click on the last frame, hold down Shift, click on the first frame, copy the frames, click and paste the frames. Okay, so that means our animation is now 10 seconds long, and you can test that just to make sure that it works out okay. And if I click here at the very end, you should see, there we go, that's the duration of our animation, 240 frames, 24 frames per second, which equals 10 seconds. Now that we've created our animation in terms of the duration, what we can now start working with is items in the background. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate a new layer, and I'll call this clouds, and I'm also going to generate a new layer and call it hills. Okay, and I'm going to pause the video for a wee second while I create these images on the said blank frames, and when we come back we will look at creating a motion tween in order to be able to allow these to move and give the illusion of the character walking past them. Okay, so as you can see, I've created, as I said, the two layers, the clouds layer and the hills layer. I've moved the hills layer down in terms of the hierarchy so that it's sitting in front of the sky but behind everything else. The clouds layer is sitting exactly where it is because it's not going to affect anything, but just for the purposes of this tutorial I'm going to move it in place just so that it's above the hills layer, because these are the two layers that I'm going to be looking to animate with the motion tween. Now I've created the hills so that they run off either side of the page. Now remember that this is almost like a window, your workspace, and anything that's in the grey area we don't see. It's on the outside, it's behind a wall effectively, so that when it moves through, all we're seeing is whatever comes into view within the workspace area. So with the hills first keyframe selected, I'm just going to use the arrow keys and I'm just going to move the hills along to get my initial starting position. Okay, so that's going to do me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go along to the end of the hills layer, right click, and I'll just convert that to keyframe. Okay, so I now have a keyframe at the end and a keyframe at the beginning, which should both have the exact same information. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the last frame, and just using the arrow keys again, I'm now going to choose the end position or end state of the hills, which you're going to suggest moving. Okay, now because my character, I'm giving the character the illusion that he's walking towards the right hand side of the screen, I've therefore moving the hills to the left hand side of the screen so it looks like he's passing, they're passing him by. And it's all down to physics and your speed equals distance over time to try and get this illusion working correctly. Okay, so let it go there, and just to grab the wee timeline, I'll show you when I move beyond this point here, I should see the hills jump. Now just remember the reason that being is that this keyframe holds the information of the hills in this position, and that continues all the way along up until this point where it jumps to the last frame. Okay, so my start point, and this is here is my end point. So what I'm going to do is in this grey area, anywhere in between this grey area, I'm just going to right click and I'm going to use create classic tween, which is going to generate this wee arrow which suggests movement, and if I grab the slider you'll see that the computer works out the paths of animation between this start point keyframe and the end point. Okay, and I'm simply going to repeat that process for the clouds. So I'll just lock the hills layer, convert to keyframe, get the start point from the clouds. Okay. Oh, I've done that on the wrong layer, so I'll just undo that and make sure that I'm working on the right layer. Convert to keyframe. Select the clouds. Just holding in Shift while I move the mouse just to constrain the clouds to a horizontal path. I'm just going to go to the end here and we'll see the same thing where there's going to be a jump. Okay. When you right click, create classic tween. Now that might be a bit too fast for the clouds. The only way we can tell is by judging it, by playing and watching back the video. So if we test the scene. Okay, so it looks like both the hills and the clouds are just moving that wee bit too fast. So what I'm going to do then is just go back to my start point for the clouds and almost just measure the jump, and what I'll do is I'll just select the clouds, move them slightly so that the difference is minimal. Okay, so it's a lot slower looking, so they're still animating over 10 seconds, but by me decreasing the distance between the start point and the end point, it's slowing the animation down. And I simply do the same thing with the hills. Change the start point and the end point. So what I'll do is grab the first frame and again bring that slightly closer to the end point, and if we test the scene I should see a difference. Okay, now it's up to you just to play about, get that how it's happy, you know, make sure that you're happy with the speed and the timing, and then add a series of other layers. You could put a sun in and various different other items. What we'll look at doing next is adding in a motion guide so that we can have a movie clip that we're generating following a motion guide through the animation. Okay.